Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception, and together we're here in the book of Genesis, continuing our journey through all 50 chapters of the book of Genesis. And Genesis, just thought that pops in my head, Genesis is so important because it lays the foundation for everything that follows, everything in the Old Testament and everything in the New Testament. And we as modern New Testament, New Covenant believers do not respect and understand the value of the Old Testament the way we should. There is a great deal here, and to the degree that we understand and are familiar with the Old Testament, then we are better equipped to appreciate and understand its fulfillment in the New Testament. And we're here right now in this section in Genesis, and we are looking at the life of Jacob, his story, and the story of his sons. Our last video, the thumbnail is on the screen, was Wrestling with God. And if you missed that, I highly recommend that you go back and watch that video, because there is a great deal for us to understand from that as we see it in our own lives, our own wrestling with God. But our text for today is picking up, moving on from that. And remember, Jacob is on his way back from Padan Aram, another name for Ur of the Chaldeans. Not really, but close enough. Up where Abraham had been born, from whence he came. He's on his way back down to the promised land, the land promised to Abraham and Isaac and also to Jacob. But there have been challenges along the way. We have seen those play out with his father-in-law, Laban. But now comes the thing that probably caused Jacob, that presented Jacob with the most fear and trepidation. The Lord told him to go back, but he's really worried about his brother Esau, big red, hairy and scary Esau, and he has heard that Esau is coming to meet him with 400 men, which was a size of a group of combatants, very familiar in the Old Testament. So he is very concerned about that. And in the last chapter, he sent ahead droves of animals as gifts to Esau, with instructions to those who presented them to Esau. And we'll see how that plays out in our text for today. But Jacob is limping along because the Lord touched the socket of his hip and crippled him in that way, in that wrestling match. We'll just read the last couple verses of the last chapter. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over Penuel, two different ways of saying the same thing, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. So here Jacob comes, limping along toward his brother Esau. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants, and he put the maidservants and their children in the front, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. We talked about Esau coming with this big group of men, and if he were just coming to say, hey, bro, great to have you back. We missed you. Let's get together and have a barbecue and watch a ball game, he wouldn't have brought 400 men. I think it reasonable to infer from the troop that came with him, he was coming to do harm. And Jacob, in his supplication to him, in sending those droves, I think it was a total, we said 550 animals that he sent on ahead as gifts to Esau, all of those were a message. And I think a big part of that message was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I did you wrong. Here are these gifts. I stole your birthright. Here are these gifts. I stole the blessing, even though God wanted him to have it, how Jacob did it. And Rebecca, it was wrong. Here are these gifts. And the way this plays out here, with having the family aligned the way he does in order of importance to him, and then he goes ahead of them. And what does he do? He crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. Now, there are documents, numerous places, but one, a set of letters that were written between Pharaoh and his vassals, meaning those who were under him, kings that were subject to him and paid tribute to him. They're called the Armana letters. And in that, this very ceremony is laid out. This is what you did to show someone else, because bowing down and greeting someone, that was kind of 7 times. Bowed himself to the ground 7 times. That was a way of saying, you are the greater and I am the lesser. Now, the funky thing here is, let's go look at what chapter 27, verse 29 says, and this is the blessing. This is the blessing that Isaac gave to whom? To Jacob. This is about Jacob. Let the people serve you and the nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren and let your mother's son bow down to you. And then the cursed be everyone who curses you and blessed be those who bless you. But here he's bowing down to Esau. Things are reversed. And there's no other way to see it than him being sorry. Is this contrition and repentance heartfelt? I think it is. I think it is. But what we're going to see is, and this is just a reality that all of us need to acknowledge. At our core, when push comes to shove, in spite of the change in our lives, in spite of the growth in faith in our lives, in spite of, for us, having the Holy Spirit and Christ himself dwelling in us, we are inclined to revert to old behavior, those patterns of behavior that are characteristic of the old man that is within us. And we'll see that later. But that does not detract from what appears to be the reality here, that Jacob is repentant. He wants to make up with his brother. Look at the reaction. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" Esau, when you read this, just see where your mind goes. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him. Where else do we see that? Where else do we see it? New Testament. Gospel of Luke. Prodigal son. What does the father do when the son comes back? The old man ran down the road and kissed him and embraced him and fell on his neck and hugged him and celebrated. Very similar reaction here. We should say that in that parable of the prodigal son, we see Jesus using this same picture, and they wept together. They wept. They have been apart over 20 years now, and they are brothers. And in that emotional moment, all of that flood of feelings, of resentment, of regret of all of that. It just washes away, and they fall into each other's arms, and they're hugging each other, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes, and Esau said, who's all these people? Who are all these people? What's going on here? So he said, and what I've done as we go through here, I have marked the instances of where there are these terms of subjugation, of inferiority, of the verbal cues of the lesser speaking to the greater. And you'll see it's here in green, but the rest of them are in this yellow. I made a mistake. I got to go back and correct in the color coding here. But so he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. He calls himself, addressing his brother, your servant, and he acknowledges that children are a blessing from God. He's not coming back and saying, yeah, look at all I've accomplished. Look at my crew. Look at my family. He's giving glory to God because God is the one who blesses us with that greatest of all blessings in this life, family. Then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. Now, I want to do this. Let's see. I am going to go find a file, pop it open here. I meant to have this open. I think it will be helpful because we rattle through these children's names, and we've got the concubines and the wives. And this is just a nice little chart. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this on the Genesis Bible Study homepage on our website, which is decodingthedeception.com. We've got a page for each one of the books that we've studied, and we put out useful materials out there. And I think this is useful because it shows the breakdown. You've got Jacob, Leah, and her children. 6 of them are Leah's kids. You've got Rachel and Joseph and Benjamin. And the reason it shows this, why Manasseh and Ephraim down here? Because when the blessing comes much later on, Joseph gets a double share. His 2 sons are blessed in his place, and they get an inheritance in the promised land. Then we got Bilhah with Dan and Naphtali, and Zilpah, Leah's maid, with Gad and Asher. These are all the sons that Jacob had. And he's broken them down in these family groups as he presents them. But listen to the one thing here. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed down. Afterward, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. He has 12 kids. Which one is named? Now, this is Moses writing this much later, but it is Joseph who is acknowledged here by name, because Joseph, we're very soon, chapter 37, we're going to transition to the rest of the book, basically being about Joseph and his account, his story. But he presented them, and this is just the way things were done. You present your family in the order of their importance, with the great in reverse order, with the greater coming last. Then Esau said, what did you mean by all the company which I met? All those droves of animals that he had sent, 550 of them in 3 different groups. And I probably didn't emphasize enough there that the animals that were sent, the way they were described, these were very valuable animals. These were the breeding stock that already had young, etc. And he said, these are to find favor in the sight of my Lord. Second time, and what's he trying to do? Find favor. But Esau said, I have enough, brother. Keep what you have for yourself. And this is just what you did. And we still do it today. Somebody goes to give you a lavish gift. What do you say? No, you don't have to do this. But the proprieties are observed here. He defers and says, no, you keep it. And Jacob said, no, please, if I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I have seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Talking about, in this emotional moment, finding acceptance from Esau is on a par with finding acceptance from God. And who was it who sent him back? God, who in doing that was assuring him that everything would be okay. God, he's tying it all together here. Please take my blessing that is brought to you because God has dealt graciously with me and because I have enough. Notice, and we are so quick to point out the failings and shortcomings of these people. It's easy for us to do, but we need to acknowledge this stuff. What does Jacob say? This man who is incredibly wealthy and is going to inherit more wealth, him instead of Esau. What does he say? God has dealt graciously with me. He knows and acknowledges and proclaims from whom his blessings flow. So he urged him and he took it. Esau says, okay, I will take it. And I'll say this, as I think about this, these are two wealthy men because Esau has done very well too. God blessed him even though he didn't get the blessing. He's living down south in the land that's going to be named after him, Edom. But no, you keep it, I don't need it. To what degree how they think about that, I have a hard time imagining that. You know why? Because I've never been a vastly wealthy human being. I've never been rich. I've never had everything that I do be blessed, and I get more and more and more. So acknowledging that, and I'm guessing chances are you're in the same boat. It's hard for us to understand how these two wealthy individuals look at this. It's kind of like when the man sold Abraham a plot of land to bury Sarah, and he goes, it's how many ever pieces of silver? What's that between you and me? And there's probably truth in that. They're existing in a financial world that we don't exist in and have not. Then Esau said, let us take our journey. Let us go, and I will go before you. Now, here's where things get funky. And we need to make sure, because here at Decoding the Deception, we love maps. This is the map that we've been looking at, and I'm going to back it out slowly. I always do it fast, and it's kind of out of whack. This is where he's coming down from, way up here, that orange track. This is where he has come down. And this now is where they are, right here. This is where he wrestled with God. And Esau, notice it's red. Mapmaker had fun with that. He is down here in Edom, which is also called Seir. And he has come all the way up here. Okay. This is where they are. Esau wants him to come back down here. Now, is there some political, you're the lesser, I'm the greater, in spite of what happened, you come down here and dwell in my territory, and that kind of gives him the upper hand? That could be. It's not explained. We're not told. Always make sure, draw the line between what we know and what we are just what is speculation. But he wants him to come with him. Let us go take our journey, and I will go before you. But Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and the herds which are nursing with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flocks will die. Please let my Lord, that term of deference, go on ahead before his servant. Should have made that one yellow too. I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure until I come to my Lord in Seir. Now, most of us can't relate to traveling through wilderness where water is a scarce resource with vast flocks and herds and children. And it is true, you can only drive these animals so far in a day, and there are offspring from these animals of all ages. The trained professionals there who had done this all their lives would watch carefully and say, we need to slow down, we need to wait, or I'll stay back here with this group and we'll catch up a little later. They need to rest. That's the way it would work. I'm sure it was a very involved undertaking. And think back to that map, how far they had already traveled. Now, while we can't relate to that, you know what we can relate to? Think of it, moms and dads out there, or you think people who don't have kids, think back to when you were young and you go on vacation and you load into the minivan, the station wagon, or the van. And how long did it take to get out of the house? How much stuff had to get packed into the car? And dad would be muttering under his breath, stuffing stuff in the trunk. I don't know how they think we're going to fit all this stuff. And then once you get going, what's the first thing that happens? I got to go to the bathroom. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. We need to stop. And dad's going, oh, we're going to keep going. And mom's saying, honey, we got to stop. The kids got to go. We're going to have a real problem. That we can relate to. It's not the same, but it is comparable. That's what, and we didn't have animals following along after the car, but that is what that is what Jacob is talking about. And Esau said, now let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. And now we get into this weird, funky thing. Esau wants him to come. Esau wants to leave people with him. And how many people came with him? 400 people came with him. And Jacob is he may not be getting suspicious, but he's a little suspicious that there's something afoot here. Esau wants to take control, put me under his control in the family group. If I go down there with him, that's what that activity, me joining in with him, is saying. And thus far, Jacob has been nothing but deferential to him, right? So, Jacob. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. The deference continues. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, that's Edom down south that I showed you. And Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of that place is called Succoth, which means booths. Okay. Back to the map. Oh, wrong map. Let's get the right map. So Esau returns back down south here, and Jacob just goes over here to Succoth, over here. Now, it is important that the things that we're going to see Jacob doing here, he is going the same places and doing some of the same things that Abraham did. And we'll be talking about that more. But this, once they cross over there, heading from east to west, they're back in Canaan. They're back in the promised land, what is very clearly the promised land. Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city, so there by the city. And he bought a parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel. Okay, so when we look at this, where he is geographically is, we'll just pop up on the screen here, Genesis 23:9. There, Abraham is buying a piece of land. Jacob is doing the same thing. He's buying a piece of land. And we're going to see, because Rachel is going to die, this is where he's going to bury her. A piece of land for burial. Okay. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel. In this same area, Abraham had put up an altar. It's where you worship. It's where you show thanksgiving to God. It's where you acknowledge that he is your God. And what does he call it? He calls it El Elohe Israel. And I thought I'd pop it up on the screen so you can see it in Hebrew. Here it is, and we're going from right to left. remember, because it's Hebrew. This is El right here. This is Elohe right here. And that's God. El is God. And El is God. Elohim is God. We're not going to go into all the particulars there. El is the shorter form. Elohe is saying this is the God of, and this is Israel. And you notice that's this little letter right here. See that? Looks like an apostrophe. That's a yod. So it's Yisrael. And just a reminder, in Hebrew, these big things that you see up here, these are the consonants. And the little dots and marks down underneath are the vowels. That's called vowel pointing, is what it is. And sometimes they're up top, but we won't get into all the particulars of that. It's completely different language than ours. But that he called this place God, the God of Israel. God of Israel. Is there some significance there? It's the God of Abraham. It's the God of Isaac. But now he is naming that altar God, the God of Israel. He had seen him face to face. He had wrestled with him and struggled through the night. And God had kept his promise and brought him back to the promised land, where he is there in the same region that Abraham was, able to build an altar. He's back home. But now it had always been the God of his father Abraham and Isaac. Now Israel, remember, his name was changed. God changed his name, and he's going to make that clear all the more again. His God. It's his God. Okay, now we get the Dinah incident. That's a good, usually I say, don't pay any attention to the captions, and oftentimes that's true. You can't ignore them because they're there in front of you. But the Dinah incident that's as good of a heading for this as any. And here is a good time to note, once again, there are things that we look at and go, that's just strange. That's odd. That's weird. This behavior of the patriarchs, these are the 12 tribes. This behavior of the patriarchs is bizarre. It's violent. What? We need to make sure that we look at this through the mind of, as though there's a little Israelite in our head, and it will help us understand things. And that's not giving a pass on many of the things that go wrong here. Although the thing that goes wrong here isn't really, in their minds, that little Israelite in your head, what they perceive as being wrong here isn't what you perceive as being wrong here. Did I just make this more interesting? I'll say it again. What an Israelite would look at this when they read it and see as being wrong isn't what you look at and read and see as being wrong. Let's jump in. And remember before, as we looked at this and went through when all these children were born, we have all the boys. Look at this. There are guys out there who look at this and say, man, I wish I had 12 sons, especially if they're farmers, right? I mean, I'd like to have daughters too, but 12 sons, he had 13 kids and 12 of them are sons. No, it just didn't name all the girls. It's just the way they did it. It was written for them. It was written to them. They understood this is the way you did genealogies. You didn't put the girls in there, and you can think about that whatever you want. It doesn't matter. This is the way they did it. But even with all that being said, when this was listed off and who was having whom, and that weirdness with the family and, oh, I'll give you my mandrakes if you let him sleep with me tonight. That funky, weird stuff. Dinah was named. Dinah was named. Why was Dinah named? Because Dinah is historically significant. And here, many chapters later, we come to her historical significance, and it's not a good thing, and it's not her fault. Now, Dinah the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." Do you hear an entitled son of a ruler there? It's going to say he's more honorable than the rest of them. But still, what did he do? He grabbed Dinah and he forced himself upon her. He violated her. And when you hear that, and when Simeon and Levi heard that, they thought about it differently. Yeah, violating was violating. He raped her. He took her and forced her to have sex with him. But the greatest violation with that was he was uncircumcised. He wasn't one of them. He was outside blood. When they said violated, that's what they were thinking of. The other is part of that. But the big thing was he was an outsider. He was an outsider. He wasn't circumcised. He wasn't part of the covenant. He was part of the nations and not part of the chosen Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's where the real anger with them came in. And it's some real anger. We're going to see that. But Shechem, being young and entitled, and the sons of the powerful and the mighty tend to get what they want. You can think of things going on in our world today, stories in the news. And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with the livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. He's just waiting. He's just waiting. And I'll throw this in now. With age comes what? Aching joints, a little bit of a belly you didn't have before maybe, but also wisdom. Wisdom. He's thinking. He's thinking. That's what wisdom does. Wisdom thinks twice and acts once. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved and very angry because, listen to how they say it, he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not be done. This is repetitively, emphatically emphatic. This is fighting words. That's what this is. That's what this is. They were upset. Think of John Wayne coming in from the ranch and finding out his house had been raided. It's that kind of mad. That's what's going on here. But Hamor, stop for a note here. Back to the map. Cucumber. Here's the map. You know what's important as we look at this map? Look at it. Look at all the names. And I know for you, many of you watch on a phone, it's fairly small. But we got Mahanaim, Abath, Bethel, Alon Baku, Shechem, Succoth, Ramoth Gilead. What don't you see? You don't see Israel. They were sojourners here. He bought a little tiny piece of land. And we could say, why was he doing that if it wasn't for burial land? Why was he doing that? Putting down roots that way, not a good idea. But you have no land. You're nobody. There's lots of them. And as wealthy as you are, there aren't many of you. If they want to do away with you, they can. So that is going to play into how a wise individual is going to interact with them. You don't pick fights you can't win. You just don't. And who knows where this would have gone if Simeon and Levi didn't do what they did. But We're going to see that being deceptive and tricksy is a family tradition. But Hamor spoke with him, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife and make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters to yourselves, so you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade in it and acquire possessions for yourselves in it. Now I want you to hear this. Jesus, taken up onto a high place, onto a high mountain, and the devil showing him all the kingdoms of the world and saying, all this I will give you, for it is mine to give, if you but bow down and worship me. When Satan did that, he was trying to undo the promise. Here, I'm not saying that's what Hamor exactly had in mind, but his intentions aren't honorable, and we will see that later. He's enticing Jacob, Israel, to undo the promise. God had remembered, this is important, and we don't think this way, and we need to. Everything is defined. Everything in this Old Testament is defined first and foremost by the fact that God set the 70 nations aside, and he put them in charge of the Elohim, the B'nai Elohim, spiritual entities, to watch over them. But Jacob was his chosen portion. Abraham, he called out of Ur of the Chaldeans, and he was making his own new nation from him. That is why it was imperative that they stay separate and distinct from all the others. Think of the book of Joshua. When they go into the promised land, they weren't supposed to intermarry with them. They weren't supposed to have things to do with them. Many of them, where the giant clans were, they were supposed to wipe out. But they certainly weren't supposed to intermarry with them and get enticed by their gods. Think Solomon and all of his wives and the temples and high places that he built for them. That is the defining theme of the Old Testament. Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, distinct, set apart. Don't go in with them. Don't intermarry with them. You're mine. You're separate. I'll send you out to them on the day of Pentecost, thousands of years from now, but not now. The plan isn't completed yet. It has not reached its fulfillment in the seed who is to come. Make marriages with us. The land is before you. What had God told Abraham? Look, all this land I will give you. What did he tell Isaac? Repeating it. All this land I will give you. What did he told Jacob? Come back to this land and I'll give it to you. And here is Hamor. Hey, you can have it all. What does the world say to you? What does the world say to me? Play by our rules, operate our way, and you can have it all. Just turn on the TV and watch the commercials. Take our drugs and you can be the person that you want to be. Buy this stuff. Pursue these things. You can drive this car. You can wear those clothes. You can have that house. Play by our rules. And God says, but just be distinct, be different. Holy means set apart. Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, so now the son is speaking. Father has spoken, now the son. Let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me ever so much dowry and a gift, and I will give it according to what you say to me. But give me the young woman as a wife. All the proprieties are being observed. Father speaks first, and then the son. Just the way things were done. But the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father and spoke deceitfully. They spoke deceitfully. The family tradition. Because he had defiled Dinah, their sister. They had cause. And they said to him, we cannot do this thing, to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. But on this condition we will consent to you, if you will become as we are. If every male of you, every one, is circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone. We could talk about the negotiating nature of this and how that lines up with the way things were done in that day, and not all that different than the way things are done today when diplomats sit down to speak. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. So the young man did not delay to do the thing because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He was more honorable than all the household of his father. So all told, Moses is telling us he was a pretty good guy. But still, he wasn't that good of a guy because he took Dinah and forced himself upon her. And just a note, what was Dinah doing going out and being out there in the open with these people? Not a smart move on her part either. I'd skipped over that, but there's so much here. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came to the gate of their city and spoke with the men of their city. That's where you talk business. That's where the big shots got together and talked things over. It was the town council, if you will, for the whole region. These men are at peace with us. Therefore, let them dwell in the land and trade in it. For indeed, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us, to be one people, if every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised. And that last note, just as they are circumcised, there were many forms of circumcision back in the day. Circumcision wasn't something unknown. It wasn't something unique to the Israelites, although its significance was. We will listen to what he says. This is their intention. And he was right. Will not their livestock, their property, and every animal of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. I've seen this happen historically, repeatedly, but even within my lifetime. Two different church bodies go to join together, right? Two different companies go and merge. And let's say that the one company is worth $10 million and the other company has a market capitalization of $50 million. When those two companies merge, who ends up in charge? Who get the positions of authority in the company? Well, it's not the people from the little company. It's the people from the big company. It's not the people from the little church body. It's the people from the big church body. It's just the way things work. And they knew it. They knew that they were going to subsume all of Israel into them. And that couldn't happen. That couldn't happen. Doesn't excuse what's done, and certainly not the way it was done, but that couldn't happen. And all who went out of the city gate of his city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. Every male was circumcised. All who went out of the gate of the city. That's saying everybody, because coming and going, everybody had to pass through the city gate, and that's where the benches were set up, where the elders would talk and discuss things. Now, here we get to the violent part, and let us make sure and pay attention, because I told you what is offensive here in their eyes, in the eyes, let's say specifically of Jacob, and what's offensive in your eyes, two different things. Now it came to pass on the third day when they were in pain, because that happens when you're circumcised as an adult. It's not a pleasant experience, and day 3 is the worst. And you can say that about any. How many out there have had surgery? What's the worst day? Is day 3, right? Now it came to pass on the third day when they were in pain that 2 of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob, so we had just Simeon and Levi, now the rest of them come. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, their donkeys, what was in the city and what was in the field, and all their wealth, and all their little ones and wives they took captive, and they plundered even what was in the houses. They took it all. They took it all. That's pretty violent. That's pretty violent. Let's see why Jacob's upset. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and since I am few in number, they will gather themselves against me and will kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I." But they said, "Should they treat our sister like a harlot?" And guys out there, you probably say, yeah, I can see their point. Maybe it was a little bit extreme. Why is Jacob upset? Why is he upset with Simeon and Levi? And this is going to have long-term repercussions. We'll talk about that in a moment. But why is he upset? Well, I'm going to go ahead and pop this picture up here and we'll talk about it. So I want to look at this image. These are the 12 sons of Jacob. And this will also, this graphic will be up on the website because it's useful. Of these, who is the one from whom the Messiah comes? Not Reuben. He's number one, firstborn son. And you know how important that is in family lineage in the ancient Near East. Not Reuben. Here's Simeon and Levi. They're skipped over too. They're skipped over, and we could put a big X on them if we were writing on the screen. They're passed over because of what happens here. Because of what happens here. Reuben, his mistake is going to come up very soon, and that's why he's passed over. It's Judah. Judah's number 4. Judah's number 4. But when we get to the blessings, and I will also, on the website, in our Genesis information page, I will also put this, which has the sons, their birth order, the reference of their birth, and what is the symbol of their blessing and where their blessing is. That will also be out there on the website. But it's this instance that when Jacob, way out in chapter 50, 49 and 50 in the book of Genesis, is giving his blessing before its death, it's because of this that he passes over Simeon and Levi. Reuben, his sin will be laid out there as well. And so it goes to Judah, who is like a lion's cub, as that lion imagery brought in. What was their offense? I shouldn't have taken the picture down. What was their offense? These 12 in the patriarchal system. Patriarchal, meaning father is the head. Father is the unit. You are part of the unit through him. He makes the decisions. He controls everything. It's the way things were done. They went around dad. They acted, and here's the big thing. Are you with me? They acted as the patriarch. And they didn't have the right to act as the patriarch. In the system, they should have gone to him and said, "Father, this is what we think you should do, and we'll go do it." But they didn't. They didn't have that discussion. They just did it. What would Jacob have done had this not occurred? We don't know. It doesn't tell us. And we wonder about that. But for the reader to whom Moses wrote this text, remember, it's for us, it's not to us. They got it. A big part of those readers were the descendants of Simeon and Levi and Reuben. They got it. They knew why. Because every dad who heard this knew. Who did they think they were? You don't do that. You don't act on my behalf. You don't do it. But they did. They did. Jacob would have done something, quite likely. Jacob would have done something, but what it was, we're not told. We don't get to find out because they did this. And now, because the young and the rash and the angry acted, on whom does it fall? It falls on Jacob. It falls on him. He's the one who's got to deal with it. And we're going to see that the aftermath of this was really a concern to him by where the story goes next, which we will get to the next time. But we have to learn, you have to learn to read the text like an Israelite. And you need to probably, when you do that, look at some good study materials, find some good study materials to help you do that. You need to find Bible teachers, which you've found here. You need to have people who will point this out to you, because it changes the text quite a bit. And this has ongoing repercussions. And I think we can say, the sons, it says the sons of Jacob said to them, do this. And that, and let's go back up here. Find my place. The sons of Jacob answered deceitfully. So we have to ask, was Jacob even there at this moment? Or had they talked about dad with this, the collective there, the boys, and he went along with it, but they were being deceitful and weren't telling him. And that's a possibility as well, but it's just something that we say that's a possible, plausible explanation for what happened, because Jacob's response makes it clear he had no approval of this whatsoever. And if he did, he was mistaken to be willing to marry in with them and all of that, because that was something they weren't supposed to do. Seeing that he went off that great distance to find a wife who wasn't part of these people, I think he understood that. And I think his sons went around him all together in order to bring this about. And it's going to cause problems for Jacob. Going to cause problems for Jacob. And in the resolution of those problems, in dealing with those problems, we're going to see a very important pattern in the lives of the patriarchs. Things we saw with Abraham, things we saw with Isaac, we're also going to see again. We've seen it before, but we'll see it again with Jacob. We're going to stop there. Hey, I pray that this teaching, this ministry is a blessing to you. If it is, please don't only hit the like button. I appreciate that. But if you leave a comment, if you just say thanks, if you just say hi, it doesn't matter what the comment is. It tells the algorithm that people are interacting with this material, and it puts it out there for other people to see. Also, I encourage you, copy the link to this, whether you're on BitChute or YouTube, copy the link and post it. Hey, interesting teaching on your social media, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it might be. That helps us get the word out. It helps us reach other people with this very valuable teaching. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless. Have a great day.